Good morning and welcome to Straight No Chaser with Dr. Julius Bailey. You guessed it, I am Dr. Julius Bailey, and I am live from the beautiful and picturesque campus of Wittenberg University here in Springfield, Ohio. Can I just say how grateful I am that shows 1 and 2 last week had over 7,500 views? Now, if my math reasoning is correct, show 1 had 2,500 views. Show 2 had over 5,000 views. So show 3 should have either 7,500 if we're just adding 2,500 per day, or it should have 10,000 if we're exponentially multiplying. Either way, please start a watch party right now. Tell a friend. Let them know that Straight No Chaser with Dr. Bailey is here. We're on Facebook and on YouTube Live. Subscribe to Dr. Julius Bailey there as well. If this is your first time here, welcome. We are a 1-hour talk show that brings you news, culture, and knowledge that affects Black folk. We are here for about 12 more episodes, and after that, only you can determine its fate. Well, that is why I say Straight No Chaser is my show. But it's your show, and it's our show. I really don't know what God has in store for this show, but on this day, on the 13th of July, I am grateful for you right now. You who are watching this show and you who are sharing this journey with me. If you don't know me, I am an associate professor of philosophy here at Wittenberg University. I'm an author of 5 academic books and 1 memoir. My current book, Racism, Hypocrisy, and Bad Faith, came out in February, and I would love for you to go to the Broadview Press site, that's broadviewpress.com. Go to my website, that's www.juliusbaileyphd.com, or any of your online retailers, and support the project. Today's show is especially important to me because I'm a church boy and a former student and seminarian. I almost became a priest, if you believe that. But if it wasn't for this girl named Gia Byers, Gia, if you watch it, I'm sorry to put you on blast. But if it wasn't for Gia Byers on that 79th Street bus in Chicago, a public school girl who changed the entire trajectory of my life. But you know what? I never stopped working in ministry. In the past 17 years, I've worked in administrative roles and consultancy roles within the church while leading workshops and, yes, preaching some as well. I have a heart for God's people of all faiths. And this is why COVID-19 and its effects on the church has been so heavy on my heart. Before I introduce my guests, let me introduce to some and present to others my co-host, the dynamic Miss Tisa, an absolute gem in Springfield, Ohio, and someone I continue to lean on. Tisa, how are you today?
I'm well, Dr. Bailey. I was glad when they said unto me, let's go into the house of the Lord.
Well, watch out now.
Okay, so I'm pretty excited about, our conversation that's going to transpire today.
I am too. I am. And just for those who are Straight No Chaser fans and followers, today's drink of choice is grape juice. Just so you know, I know it was the blood.
I know it was.
Let's drink to that. You know what I'm saying? So we're excited. And ladies and gentlemen, we have first someone who's very important to me, an educator, a community center director, an author, right? He just got a book out, a musician, a preacher par excellence, Pastor Todd Johnson of Second Baptist Church of Warren, Ohio. Pastor Todd, how you here, brother?
Yes, sir. How you doing, Dr. Bailey?
Oh, man, that voice just rings in my ear, man. I'm good, man. It's just good to hear from you. I see you online all the time, and it's just, I got to get back up to Warren. I miss y'all so much, and I'm just glad that you're here with us today, brother.
Well, your family over here in Warren, we claim you too. You're one of us.
I know that's right. So you know what, man? Let's just jump into it. But before we really get into the COVID, the COVID stuff, I gotta ask you this, right? So, Matt Burrows, right? He died January of 2019
Yes.
out in Niles, Ohio, which is kind of on the outskirts of Warren, where I go to the mall and the hotels and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in Trumbull County, right?
Yes.
And the prosecutors, I think it was Watkins and Becker,
Mm-hmm.
they decided not to charge the police officer who killed Matt Burrows. You know, you knew the young man. You knew him well, and you were first on the scene and first out there in the public to seek justice for this young man. Pastor Dodd, you know, I can't begin this show without asking you, has there been any developments, anything that you can tell us about just not just Matt Burrows, but specifically the ways in which activism and fellow pastors or whatever have been engaged with this issue and in other issues abroad there in Trumbull County?
You know, Dr. Bailey, the Matthew Burrows situation, the best way I can describe it is the lightning rod that wasn't. And I still believe that it has not garnered the attention it deserves locally and on the national scale. Mr. Watkins and Assistant Prosecutor Becker determined not to prosecute. And frankly, everything about this case reflects what we've seen all over the country. A lot of demonizing of the individual involved.
Yes.
I have the report. I went down and personally picked it up myself from the prosecutor's office, and it spends more time talking about his minor criminal past than it does the actual incident on that day. It follows the pattern of the ever-expanding threats that Black people pose. You know, Trayvon Martin, his fists were a deadly weapon. In this case, Matt being in a vehicle is a deadly weapon, potentially. Mm-hmm. And that's how it worked out. What good did come of this is that the family is still pursuing civil litigation. Unfortunately, the Department of Justice stepped in, but we all know who's running that Department of Justice. And we know the state of our current Department of Justice, so they declined to investigate further either. But out of that effort has come a focused effort to ignite the political activism of young Black individuals in Trumbull County and beyond. We've started an organization called I Vote Black, and we have a page now on Facebook called I Vote Black Trumbull County. And we have been able to pinpoint through this process where a lot of the deficiencies exist. Not just the typical things you see on TV, but what we're starting to see now with the prosecutors, with the police giving opportunity to get their alibi straight. You know, they're investigating themselves, basically. This tight-knit community is literally 15 minutes big. Everybody knows everybody. And just like all us preachers know each other, all police and prosecutors know each other. And so now we're able to focus voting, activism, political power where it needs to be. And so we're trying to move a generation from ranting online to going to the polls and to putting pressure where it needs to be, whether it's economic, whether it's, you know, at the ballot box, whether it's just making noise, making life uncomfortable for individuals who they might not even be supportive of the things that are happening. They're not pro killing Black people, but they're certainly not putting themselves on the line to stop it either. So we feel like we need to make life uncomfortable for them. And I think you have to be mindful, Dr. Bailey, that we've seen the backlash to the Black Lives Matter movement to these. So these officials, quite frankly, are often under more pressure on a regular basis from the more conservative pro-police side than they are from our side, because we're sporadic. They're consistent. And so that's what we're trying to shift the narrative as and how we approach this. I'm not discouraged, though sometimes I'm disappointed. Sometimes it takes time. We've seen some cases that we didn't hear about for a year or 2 or 3 years on the national stage. And maybe that will happen with Matt. But with George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, maybe we will add his name to that list and continue to fight. But right here in Trumbull County, we're trying to register new Black voters. We're putting every official on notice, white, Black, and in between. And we are making it clear that we're not voting red or blue, we're voting Black. We're voting proudly and unapologetically for Black interests, They're trying to install a new impound lot in the city of Warren that will impact Black motorists. They're trying to pass a 0.5%, make a permanent 0.5% sales tax in this city that will continue to fund police and safety departments that we don't feel have served us. It's been in place for almost 4 years. And just a quick statistic, in our small little town, we had, I want to say, 26 murders in the 4 years prior to this new tax to bring our police department up to full strength. And in the 3.5 years since it's been in place, we've had 38 murders, and most of them unsolved. So Black communities need to ask, where are our tax dollars going? What are our monies going to fund? And what's the hardest way to hit people and affect political change? And that's through hitting them in the pocketbook and at the ballot box. And we need to
that's important work, man. I thank you for that. You know, clearly there's I know there are people watching right now, or certainly that will tune in, who would say, you know, here we go, you know, church and politics, we need to separate that, and the church isn't about that. And why is it that, you know, and this is this coming inside Black communities, outside Black communities? And I, you know, every time it comes to me, of course, I just come from, you know, a social justice, you know, gospel that engages, you know, in the least of these, that engages in those on the backside of power at all times. That's the way I read Jesus, right? But, you know, even our tradition, right? Even the tradition in which you represent. We think about, you know, historically, when we think about women like Sojourner Truth, right? She was a preacher, right? When you think about women like Maria Stewart, she was a preacher, right? When we think about Frederick Douglass, right, our great abolitionist, he was a preacher. When we think about Daniel Payne, AME Church, Sister Julia Foote, AME Church. We think about Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, right? We think about these names, not to mention, I mean, that's 18th and 19th century. And then when you think about the 20th century, and obviously we use King and all those of the struggle as point of references. But, you know, Todd, you know, and I know, and people need to understand that the church itself, and especially the Black church, is about freedom. It's about the sort of the ability and the necessity from the emancipation of the soul, right, to find a resting place at some point. But it's also of the body, of the here, of the now. A church cannot be sort of hell bent, if you will, on sort of getting folk free. I mean, folk needs to be hell bent, I think, Tisa, on getting folk free from the proverbial knees on our necks, right? I mean, there's more George Floyds out here, not figuratively and literally, and the church has to be at the forefront of that. So I thank you, and I think our relationship means so much to me because I see you as a younger brother. You're not young, but you're younger than me. But I see you as a young pastor of a pretty, you know, traditional and kind of an older church, right? And so if you could just kind of let us know, for those pastors, for those street ministers, for those individuals who may be in other denominations, well, first, you know, where did you get your passion for social justice from? And two, I think the question becomes, what would you tell those assistant pastors? What would you tell those parishioners who want to be on fire with issues, but may have a pastor, may have an imam, may have a rabbi to say, well, you know, we're not going to touch that kind of stuff. What do you give the people today for that information?
You know, the passion, first of all, I was raised by amazing parents. They're upright people who believed in integrity and honesty and doing what is right, doing things the right way. Hardworking blue collar parents. My father's a pastor. He's not an activist type. He's a quiet backdoor, but very supportive. Backstage, I should say, not backdoor, backstage type of man. Reverend Johnson, my father, my mother, Lady Linda, and they're wonderful people. I was raised in a church that we would go to, not just the police or that kind of thing. We would go to the local corner store that was selling drugs, you know, on the side, or paraphernalia, or degrading apparel. We would go to the corner store that was, you know, allowing children to come in and buy liquor, and we would stand outside and cut a fool until we got enough attention to either shut that store down or get them to change their practices. But as far as civil rights, that wasn't a huge thing in my upbringing. My great-grandfather was a pastor in the city who walked everywhere and really loved people. He was a walker. And when I took on the pastorship at Second Baptist, I did something I hadn't done before. I started walking around my neighborhood. I started walking up the sidewalks. And what I discovered was that as a pastor, I am automatically placed in a political position, whether I want to be or not. Because as long as politics affect the people that I shepherd and the people that surround my community and that are outside the doors of my church, whether they are believers or Christians or not, it does not matter what their religious background or convictions are. If they are within the purview and the region of my church, my ministry where I serve, then I am obligated to use every tool to better their lives. And politics is one of those. Now, we have to just be careful we don't get confused between politics and partisanship, because that's where I think a lot of pastors get afraid. They don't want to take a side. And I understand that. And so our goal is to don't take a side with a political party, take a side with the concerns and needs of people. And wherever the concerns and needs of people are best being met in a way that does not exploit nor remove rights from anyone else, that's what we should pursue. And so to those who say, well, that's not the way, you shouldn't do it that way, I will say that everything from what you eat to where you live, to what you breathe, to the sidewalks you walk on or cannot walk on, to whether your drains are being cleared in your neighborhood, to whether the street lights are on, whether your children are getting a quality education, and believe it or not, whether even your church or ministry can expand to its capacity is dependent in part upon politics. You have to have a voice that speaks truth to power. And for my Christian friends out there, as well as anybody else who has any conviction, who at least respects the Bible doesn't just say do justice in one or two Old Testament scriptures. It literally shows us how to do justice. It teaches us how to do justice. In John chapter 3, when John the Baptist is coming out the wilderness, Luke chapter 3, when he's coming out the wilderness hollering, and he says, repent, they say, well, how? And he tells each of them, this is how you do it. You know, you soldiers, stop abusing people. You religious folks, stop mistreating people. He literally says it. We don't talk about this a lot, but when Paul and Silas were locked in jail and they had their little shouting party in jail, when he gets out, they try to release him at night without anybody noticing. And he says, no, I'm a citizen. You have to give me my citizenship rights. That sounds like a Black Lives Matter march to me.
I know that's right. I know that's right.
You're not going to let me sneak out the back door after you literally beat me up last week and locked me in here. You're going to let me go with the same fervor that you locked me up in the first place. So there are multiple examples. And of course, Matthew 25, we always talk about feeding the hungry and clothing the naked, but we forget about the part about visiting those who are imprisoned. And that is not just who's locked up today. It's who's locked down by the systems in society that hold back the fullness of a liberated and emancipated life. So all of us have to put our words to action, put feet to our faith. Nobody is calling everybody to be an activist or everybody to do this and do that. But I will say this about I'd say maybe one pastor from Trumbull County joined us when we fought for Matthew Burrows. About 5 or 6 ministers joined us from Youngstown. I'm convinced we would have a different result. We would have had a different result and a better chance if we would have had 30 or 40 pastors at that police station, because there is power in numbers. But as long as there's just one guy, then there's always going to be the opportunity to squash that one guy. So to whatever your religious conviction is, I would say that whatever it is, I know that all major religions call us to love, call us to treat people with the dignity that the Creator has given them. And we have to activate that beyond our pulpits, beyond our platforms, beyond our teaching centers.
That's rich stuff, man. That's rich stuff. I'm reminded of, I don't know, I want to say it was maybe around the 1920s with Nanny Helen Burroughs, that good old Baptist woman. And she was, I think it was one of those National Baptist conventions, and she just ripped into the pastors and was just like, listen, y'all are doing such a great job at shouting, heaven down, right? But she said, I need y'all to be involved a little bit more heavenly. A little bit more personally with those of us who are here on the ground,
Right.
And so, and that's why I think the work that you and others do. Obviously, there are thousands and thousands across America, but we also know that there, as you just mentioned right there in Trumbull County, there are those who, for whatever reason, right? For whatever reason. Like I can imagine, I don't want to really rehash your situation there, Brother Todd, but I mean, I can imagine there are people who are saying, well, maybe a shooting is justified, or maybe they deserved it, or maybe they should have, whatever. But I'm always up, and my granddaddy taught me as a pastor, listen, my job is to the people, right? What are the ailments? What are the cries of the people? And the people need me out there, right? There's no need for me to sit in my office talking about what Pastor Todd doing. And that brother need to sit down somewhere. No, because your parishioner got a son that's locked up. Your parishioner got children that are being harassed at schools. Your parishioners, they got folk who ain't eating right. And so that is why I thank you what you're doing. And that is why this show means so much to me, because we have to stop being about the business of, I like the way you put it, partisanship. It's not necessarily about Democrats versus Republicans. It's about God's work and how God's work operates. And true, well, we have to kind of delineate, right? Because some of our Southern Baptists and some of our evangelists, we got a different read on some of this stuff, right? But certainly, but brother, I want to show, if you don't mind, I want to show a video as we kind of transition here into a conversation around COVID-19. I want to show this quick video for the people. It's about a minute and a half, and then we're going to jump into a COVID-19 discussion.
Okay.
Our city has placed legal consequences on groups gathering above 500. The church is not prepared for that. It doesn't work that way. It's not designed that way.
Right now, our church is 100% digital. We've moved everything online, our groups, our Bible studies, our services, and we saw great impact in that. I do believe that this crisis and pandemic is not going to change the way people view God, but I do think it will change the way people consume and view church.
Several empty pews as Seventh-day Adventist church members stayed away from service yesterday. Most churches closed their doors.
To reduce the number of people in contagious environment, no gathering with 500 people or more.
So we must have faith in God. Come and worship with Reed Temple online.
Log in, watch us live. We will still have praise and worship. In this moment, when so many people are overwhelmed with a sense of fear, we need to worship.
Several states and cities closing restaurants, bars, gyms, and movie theaters. The new guidelines tonight from the White House: avoid gatherings of 10 or more.
And I'm challenging you today to let that peace rise in your heart right now and comfort you. Hysteria never saved anybody.
Wow.
So here we are, man. COVID-19 has hit the world, and the doors of the church building has essentially been closed. Pastor, tell us what ministerial challenges or even opportunities have been afforded to you as a pastor and those who you work with during this COVID-19 period.
Because every shepherd's heart true shepherd's heart is always focused on people. That's the number one pain point, if you will, the separation and the distance from people. You can't underestimate that social isolation. And I know you have a guest that will talk about that, but in the sense of one of the most intimate and life-affirming experiences that we have at our disposal, which is our spiritual uplift, our spiritual community. For us to be distanced from that is, my children miss school. There are some people who miss their coworkers, but to miss the people that you pray and cry and laugh and shout and have mourned with, you've married and buried, that's a different kind of missing. And I get, though some pastors, I think, are coming from a foolish place who are being sort of politically stubborn and all of that. The pushback from ministers and pastors, I think, that come from a pure place, they are coming from a place where they understand how detrimental that separation can be. I don't care what, you can be an atheist, at least acknowledge the importance that spirituality has played in people's lives, and that these centers being closed, these buildings being closed, is an incredible challenge. There are babies, my church is literally in a housing project. We share a parking lot with a housing project. To know that those babies don't have a place to run to and just walk in on a Sunday morning breaks my heart, because you don't know what they were running from.
Right.
You don't know that hour or two. By the way, we're getting on them. Stop eating, stop smacking. You're making noise. But, they're in the house. They're safe. They're loved. Those elderly people, we don't get to see. They're trapped at home. They're by themselves. For many of them, church was all they had to go to fellowship, to socialize. And then, as a community building ministry, feeding, clothing, being there for day-to-day needs. Shortly before COVID, I tell this story. I was helping to arrange a food distribution. We were going to move it over to the homes and literally operate it right out of the office of the homes next door. And a baby had stopped breathing in the apartment next door. And they ran over and saw me and called for me. And unfortunately, that baby passed. And it was a tragic, crib death type of a situation. But just being present like that in the community, just being there, because we're open every day and you're there. That's the intangible moments that people don't notice. Everybody's talking about offerings and you preachers' egos aren't being stroked anymore and all that stuff. For most of us, it has nothing to do with any of that. We broke as it is anyway. That was never really most of our reality. We just wanted to be there for people. So an opportunity is, many of us have been forced out of our boxes. Many of us have been forced to embrace technology that the church has been resisting for years. I've been streaming for years. I've always liked to use technology. Wish I could have used even more. I've used video clips in my sermons. I've, tried to do everything. Seeing other people get out there, get out the box, think outside the box, has been an opportunity. The question is, will we seize it to its full potential? One thing I would say is that we have to be careful that we don't replace butts and pews with Facebook views. Because
hold on, repeat that though one more time.
Write that one down. We don't want.
Right, we gotta write that down. Everybody with a pen, write it down.
Butts and pews with Facebook views. In other words, we've always been shallow sometimes about how many are coming, who's walking in the door, and not really worried about discipling and growing people's hearts and spirits. And we're kind of doing the same thing online. Now people are bragging about how many views they get, how many people tuned in, how slick is the production. We still have to be at the meat of what we're called to do as ministers, whatever your religion is. Yes. Try to minister to people's hearts and minds. The graphics are nice, the lights and the smoke, having the backdrop and doing all these camera tricks. That's great. But if you're not giving people something to affirm their life, all that's for nothing. And so regardless, I've been saying this, honestly, world of chaos and confusion, I tell my preachers, clarity is key. You should even preach simpler. Because so many people are going to tune in that don't know preacher jargon, that don't know Holly, if you hear me, and all these Greek and Hebrew words and all that. Clarity is key. And so it's an opportunity for us to reset ourselves because so much has been removed from us. Now, I do want to get back. We went back. Trumbull County actually had a flattened curve situation, and now we're in a red alert again. So I don't know what we're going to do. But we went down to literally having no more than 20, 30 people in a room that seats 700. And we split up our services, and we're still getting most of our people online. We might shut back down again. One thing I'm thankful for as a young man, my generation is all about mobility and flexibility. And I've been preaching to my church and my contemporaries that you have to be mobile, you have to be flexible. Now we have no choice. Be mobile, be flexible. So I miss the choir though, because that's a danger. I miss touching and hugging, because that's a danger. So
No, that's real, and I appreciate. There's two things I appreciate here, and then I want to transition to Sister Robyn. Hopefully, you can stick with us, Pastor. If not, I understand. Okay, good. So first of all, this is what we do on this show. We cannot replace butts in pews with Facebook views. We gonna drink to that. Hey, all right.
Communion. Take that communion.
Yeah, we gonna agree to that, yeah. But also, I think what's important, and that's why I love the heart of ministry, because what you're articulating, and Sister Tisa, you understand this, is that people who love God love the people of God, right? And so it's one thing to be spiritual at the crib.
Mm-hmm.
It's another thing to be spiritual with folk, right? And be able to touch and hug and see and even get upset with folk, right? Right? Because that's also a test, right? And so some of us ain't really been Holy Ghost tested, right? We've been at the crib, you know what I'm saying?
Amen.
And so that's what we, what Pastor Todd talks about here is that pastors also miss connection.
Amen.
Right, and we need to, we ain't gonna spend time. We're gonna bring Sister Robyn in here right now, but we ain't gonna get down with all these folk talking about pastors just missed their Cadillacs and all that old crazy 100-year-old BS they be trying to throw out there. The reality is that ministry is about touching and changing lives. Right? It's about freedom, emancipation. It's about allowing the individual to understand that there is a balm. Right, and that there are opportunities and hope that we must linger to, and so that's why I appreciate it. And speaking of hope, joining us is Sister Robyn Hill of Robyn Hill Counseling Services. She also is an author and a teacher. She is a counselor, my counselor. She is a workshop facilitator, CEO of the Great Lakes Black Authors Expo, which she invited me last year, and I appreciate that, sister. So, Sister Robyn, I know you know Pastor Todd. I know you fired up right now. But what you got to say right now?
First of all, pass the plate for Pastor Todd, because that was good. That was a good word right there. So, I don't know. I'm just sitting here. I'm stuck on that little phrase too. I like that. But
I know.
He's good, and this is why he's one of my favorite. I've only been to his church maybe once or twice because I live out here in Cleveland, but he is one of my favorite people. To hear him speak and to hear his the way he takes politics and makes it applicable to the believers in the church. He's on fire. I like him. I like him a lot.
Right. So look, I think he's still around. So we'll bring him here. Is he still around? I think he's still around. Yeah, good. So we'll bring him up here in a second. Let me ask you a quick question. So you've witnessed, right, especially from March on, but you mentioned especially in March, churches wrestling with whether or not to close or to remain open, right? Yeah. You saw many of the saints, right, calling on faith, right, and not quite science, right, and some churches still having this conversation, right? Mm-hmm. And some people are begging pastors, Pastor, please don't close the doors for many of the reasons that Pastor Todd just talked about, right? So, but what we see though, Robyn, is a sort of a tension, if you will, right? We see a tension with everything from relationships to healthcare, and about this issue of science and faith, right? And so, can you speak on what maybe we can call a spiritual conflict between faith and maybe just call it precaution, right? Yeah. Not to call it science, but just with a spiritual conflict between faith and precaution, right? Especially as we see it now with COVID-19.
So when you're having a spiritual conflict, there's like three components when you're dealing with spirituality. There's your understanding of God, there's the understanding of self, and then there's the your teaching about God and self and everything. And so if we have a teaching that teaches us that that there's that no harm is going to come near you. We'll use that. No hurt and harm will come near you. So we have that teaching, but then hurt and harm is coming near us. Now we are in conflict because it's but we don't question the teaching. A lot of times we apply the teaching to our understanding of God or our understanding of self. So then if hurt and harm is coming to me, then either I must be the one that's in error or God is in error. And so we begin to either question God and his existence and his powerfulness, and why would God allow a pandemic to flow because the teaching says no hurt, harm will come near me. So God, you must not be protecting me. Or we start to question ourselves. I must not have enough faith, because if I had faith, then this would not be happening to me. But that is a very, the issue is not with you or with God. The issue is with the teaching. And we often teach that suffering is not going to happen in this world, or that bad things will not happen. And that's not a correct teaching. We see this in the book of Job, where Job is like, look, I didn't do nothing wrong. There is no rhyme or reason. God needs to come talk to me about what's going on. And when God did come talk to him, he said, you're right. First, let me talk to you about who I am, but then I'm going to let you know you are right. You didn't do anything wrong. And it's just what happened. And I'm going to restore to you. But we give the counsel of Job's friends. Well, maybe you didn't pray hard enough. Well, maybe you need to do these things. Or Job's wife, just curse God and die, because he must not love you. It must be you. Just take yourself out so we can all get back to our normal life. Those are the errors in teaching when it comes around to dealing with suffering. Suffering is just a part of this world. And so we have this conflict going on, and people are not wanting to accept, or they're going on to the far end of the doom and gloom. God has abandoned us all, and now we're all going to die. So we have this tension within believers as far as what's going on with COVID.
Yeah. So what many are witnessing, and I think that Pastor Todd also made references, is social isolation, right? And social isolation and the church, the mosque, the synagogue, the temple, and it's not exclusive, right, to the Black church, but Black churches particularly thrive on touch, right? On the idea of dialogical call and response, right? They on the affirmation of young people, right? Think of how many Easter speeches were not given this year, right? How many young folk wasn't able to affirm their confidence from the stage, right? Pastor Todd mentioned the choirs, right? I miss the rhythmic beats that go on before church, during church, and after church, right? The kids that jump on the drums and know they ain't supposed to, but they jump on the drums, but because they still fired up from church. And so what I think we're seeing, or what are you seeing, I guess I should ask, in your counseling practice and the workshops that I know you've been doing as it relates to folk just missing church?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we were built out of relationship. We were created out of relationship. When God created Adam and Eve, if you look at the creation story, he pulled Eve from the side of Adam. We were created out of relationship. We were built for this. And so in this time, we are all struggling when it comes to this lack of connectedness. It's not that you can't talk to people on the phone, but there is an energy transference when I come to you and give a loving hug and we feel that warmth. There is something to that is missing. I think that we have to recognize there's a difference between solitude and isolation. Isolation can be very bad. It can lead to negative thought patterns. It can lead to depressive episodes and anxious thoughts because you're sitting there alone with your thoughts that may not be spirit driven. So isolation is not always a good thing, but solitude can be a good thing. Solitude is one of the spiritual disciplines. This is one of my favorite books from seminary, Celebration of Discipline by Richard Foster. And he talks about different sections of spiritual disciplines. We put a lot of emphasis on the gathering, the collective worship, which is a spiritual discipline. But right now, that not being available, we have to look at other ways to keep our spirit strong. The mind, body, and soul are all connected. So if your spirit is being attacked, mentally you're being attacked and you're physically being attacked. You're going to start to see illness. You're going to start to see mental illness because we have to take care of all three in balance. You know, if you're not taking care of yourself physically, you might find yourself in a spiritual conflict. All those things are in balance. So we must take care of all three. So in this book is a section. They have three different sections of disciplines. There's the inward disciplines, which we talk a lot about: meditation, prayer, fasting, and study. Then there's the corporate disciplines, which is the confession, worship, guidance, and celebration. That's where you see a lot of that is happening together. But the outward disciplines is where we need to be practicing right now for our mental well-being, and that is the simplicity, taking advantage of simplicity, taking advantage of solitude, submission, which is, that takes a lot of teaching to understand that one, because we We've altered that definition so much. And service. So you see a lot of people, especially with service, that's been picked up a lot. You see everyone's feeding the community. They're making sure the children and the elderly are getting meals. That is a spiritual discipline. Those are the things that's going to keep you mentally and spiritually strong during this time.
Sure, no, that's a good point. Pastor Todd, you want to kind of jump in a little bit here, man? Are people blowing you up, man? Pastor, we need you. We miss you. I know you got a good, I mean, your social media stuff is off the chain, but I know folk are pulling at you, brother.
You know, and it was heartwarming. One of the most heartwarming moments was when my church mother video called me via Facebook Messenger. And she played with that phone until she figured out how to do it. Yeah, Mother Wallace, and I love her so. She just turned 75. And she said, I'm tired of watching you online. I wanted to see your face and hear your voice for myself. And you can't help but acknowledge that, as Robyn said. And I think that even when we have these debates, we all know that the safest thing is to stay locked down and at home. One thing I've learned to do is at least be gracious to the thought process and what goes on, why people react and justify their actions the way they do. Some people are being defiant and rebellious. Other people really are just looking for one crack, nook, or cranny to try to find some semblance of normalcy, even if it's dangerous. Even if there's a danger there, it's like kids that just go outside when they know it's too cold because they're tired of being inside, you know. It's a reality. So I'm grateful for the humanizing that I think this has done for all of us. It does not change what God or what our view of God is, but it helps us to recognize our human side and be more gracious to it in the process.
That's a word there. That's a word. So as I figured what would happen, I mean, first of all, those of you who are just tuning in or have been tuning in for the last few minutes, we have Pastor Todd Johnson, the pastor of the Second Baptist Church of Warren, Ohio. They call it the House of Hope. Yes. Those of you in Chicago, don't trip. This ain't Meek's church, but this Pastor Todd Johnson's church. The House of Hope in Warren, Ohio, right? There's enough hope to get around in many houses. I mean, Pastor Todd, them Salem folk, man, they be acting up in Chicago. I love Pastor Biggs, but them Salem folk, if you start talking about any other House of Hope, they gonna act like ain't no more houses at all. You know what I'm saying? But you got Pastor Todd Johnson. We also have Robyn Hill, who is just everything, but she is a counselor. She is a church and ministry counselor as well as a personal counselor. She's a licensed counselor, and she has a practice in Beechwood, Ohio. And so time is moving on as fast. I knew this was going to happen. So let me just ask kind of a final kind of question. So when I was about, 26 years ago, I was a student at Howard University, and I took a sociology class. And there was a term that I learned called social capital. And I'll never forget, I don't remember a whole bunch I learned in college in terms of individual terms, but social capital I never forgot because it resonated so much to me as a church boy. And just real briefly, my understanding of social capital is that, there are, for many, on Sunday, when you're the head deacon or you're the trustee or you're on the usher board or you're the nursery director or if you're the director of the kitchen, right? If you're security out in the parking lot, right? These are titles and positions and yes, ministries, but this gives you a feeling of social capital, right? And it becomes important, especially as you probably went through a 9 to 5, 6 days a week, where all you did was punch a clock and nobody really give a daggone about you anyway. But at the mosque, at the temple, at the synagogue, you are important. COVID-19 now has put so many of these people out of the church, right? Out of the building of the church and out of their formal roles within the church. Robyn and Pastor Todd, let's start with Pastor Todd. Let's start with you. We give Robyn the last word here. Pastor Todd, how have you attempted to sort of utilize your ministry leaders, knowing that they need to be involved? How have you tried to utilize these ministry leaders? And then how have you also dealt with those who are just missing the social capital of feeling like they're involved?
Yeah, we all know, especially in the African American tradition, that being in the church, having a function in the church is sometimes your only point of reference of significance and importance in a community. And I will say this vulnerably, I dropped the ball at first on heeding that in the heat of the moment of how do we keep a service going? How do I record? How do I get my sermons online? And I looked back after about 2 months, about 8 weeks, and said, this has been a one-man show for 8 weeks. This is not good. You've literally seen no one's face. So I started, what we had been doing is I was piping in prayers and scripture readings from other members from their homes. We would have them pre-record from home, and then we'd pipe it into our online broadcast. Then we started trying to celebrate accomplishments that we weren't able to acknowledge. If someone graduated, a wedding anniversary or something. Now that we're talking about it, whether we're able to stay together or not, now it's every auxiliary has to find a way to reach out to our congregation. Even if you go meet in a parking lot in a park and say, all the ladies are going to be in the park today, and just say hi, just look at each other, see each other again. All the men are just going to stand out in the yard and bring a lawn chair and just, on a nice day, we'll just drive by. You've seen the parades, everybody does a parade now. Every place is New Orleans now. Everybody's doing a parade. Right. Find ways to do that. But quite frankly, I'll just close with this and let Robyn mop up. I think God is flattening the curve in the same way that we want to, in that the idea that there's one guy way up here and everybody else down there, where we're co-laborers and we're brothers and sisters again. I don't have a big platform to stand on in the same way I did before. I don't have revivals and conferences to preach. It might be a good thing for us to reprogram our minds to not find our significance in a function and find our significance in our identity. And that might be the great byproduct blessing of this pandemic for our mental and emotional and spiritual selves. And I'll try to keep other people out there because they need to see other voices. Folks are tired of hearing me preach and teach and talk. But at the same time, we have to get that hierarchy that can get very unhealthy out of our minds and start being brothers and sisters again.
Interesting. Thank you, Pastor Todd. Thank you very much. Sister Robyn, how are people dealing with the sort of the loss of social capital, the feeling of not being as important in the last 10 weeks as they were for the past 10 years?
It's very tough. With the populations that I work with, they already were lacking social capital. And so one of the big pushes with my clients is to get them involved somewhere, get them into a place of belonging, because we all have this need for belonging. We have this need for acceptance. And so now that is not as easily found, because it used to be say, well, go visit a church or go, attend a Bible study. And that piece is missing. So it's very difficult. But to continue encouraging, finding different ways. Like I said, there's a lot of ministries who are reaching out to the community. Join in with that, even if it's not a formal ministry. It could be an organization that's feeding hungry people. Just getting involved, delivering meals will give you that sense of connectedness, because that's what's missing is I don't feel connected to people. I don't feel connected to the community anymore. You can do not YouTube, but Zoom conference meetings all the time, but it still lacks a little something. But I'm not knocking that either. If that's what you can do, I know of some Jehovah's Witness clients that's what they do, is they have Zoom gatherings. So instead of just watching the preacher or the leader speak a message, they're all in a room together talking. And that's how they're connecting. So just being creative, but also finding ways that you can get involved, because that's going to give you your sense of connection.
Sure. So listen, all you all out there, I see a lot of you have been paying attention so far, and I know thousands of you are going to come afterwards. We have had a short but very, very engaging conversation with two people that mean a lot to me. And so if you got your pens, you took notes already. Pastor then told you 3 things to think about. Robyn then told you 3 things to think about. Y'all didn't went straight Baptist on the day. But certainly, Pastor Todd Johnson, the Second Baptist Church of Warren, Ohio. Look him up. Look up Facebook, Twitter. Follow him. I know some of you on Sundays now, y'all watch 3 and 4 pastors anyway, right? So go ahead and add Pastor Todd to one of them. Churches, ministry leaders, administrators like myself, if you're looking, for conversations on church healing, on mental health, Robyn and I have done a number of church conversations on mental health and the church and loving and healing pastors, right? Things like that. If you're looking to contact Sister Robyn Hill, look her up also, or Robyn Hill Counseling Services in Beechwood, Ohio. Robyn, Pastor Todd, thank you for your time. Yes, I love you both. Soon I will be up there and see y'all and touch y'all, even if it's, out of afar, man. I love y'all, and I thank y'all for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
Take care.
Likewise.
All right, so guys, listen, you know what time it is, right? It is, I know a lot of you are ready to hang up. Don't hang up, don't click off yet. We have a couple more minutes. And, first of all, we want to thank you for joining Straight No Chaser with Julius Bailey. Of course, my co-host, Tisa. How'd you like this conversation?
I appreciated it greatly. I had a couple questions, but it was no need to ask them because they addressed them.
I know that's right.
Well, when 2 or 3 are gathered in his name, is he not present? I'm through.
Let's go one more drink to Robyn and Pastor Todd.
Yes.
Remember, this is grape juice, y'all. I know it was the blood. You know how that goes. No, it was the blood. No, it was the blood for me. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
But look, we are grateful. Again, this is just day 3. We have about 12 days of this in this pilot to see if this is something that you really want to continue with me and maybe even with Miss Tisa. But listen, like us on Facebook, Straight No Chaser with Dr. Julius Bailey. Like the page on YouTube. Go in there, subscribe to the channel. Yes. Tell a friend, pass the word, share this conversation today. Well, what we're about to do right now is a segment that we call I'll Drink to That, even though we've been drinking to a whole bunch of stuff already, right? But I'll Drink to That is our segment. Right now, it's unsponsored. If you right here are interested in sponsoring a part of the show or the show itself, we are looking for sponsors, and specifically the I'll Drink to That sponsor, where you will be the sponsor of the last 10 minutes of the show. I'll Drink to That is an opportunity for us to highlight an individual or organization or people that are doing great things that we found out about this week, or that we really wanted to articulate that we found out about this week. And so for today's I'll Drink to That, I'll hand it over to my co-host, Ms. Tisa.
Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. So today, our I'll Drink to That segment, we are going to share with you about What's the Biz with TJ. What's the Biz with TJ is a TV show, and it's a manifested vision of a Dayton native by the name of Tejal Cartwright. Her inaugural show was in August of 2019. I asked Tejal how she came about with the show and the content and things of that nature. And Tejal shared that she noticed that the Black community would come together and they would boycott the larger corporations. But as a result of the boycott, there was not alternative solutions that was gifted to the Black community. She also noticed that there would be conversations about Black businesses, but while engaging in those conversations, some people did not know that Black businesses existed. And she wanted to bring more awareness to the Black businesses, not just in Dayton, Ohio, Montgomery County, but in the surrounding areas as well. So her way of bringing awareness to these Black businesses was to start her TV show, which is called What's the Biz with TJ. You can find that on Facebook. She has a Facebook page, and it's called What's the Biz with TJ. You can find her on YouTube. That too is What's the Biz with TJ. And you can also find her on Instagram, and that's What's the Biz _. She's currently working on season 3. She also shared that if you would like to be featured on a What's the Biz episode, that you can feel free to reach out to her via email. Her email address is tazelcartwright@gmail.com. And to get a taste of what the Biz with TJ has to offer, feel free to tune in this evening at 6:30 on Instagram, and she'll be interviewing Rachel Blanks. So going forward, please tune in to What's the Biz, and you can learn more about Black entrepreneurs, not just in Montgomery County, but in surrounding counties as well.
So, to Miss TJ, what's the biz? We'll drink to that. So look, before we go, I do have one more that I want to highlight. This is kind of selfish. I typically don't like to do this, but I think you heard on social media, I have a new girlfriend. Her name is Amazon.
Okay. Right? She's cute.
Yeah, she's cute. And she's always there when I call on her.
Resourceful.
And she's very resourceful, right? And Amazon has been coming to see me a lot during COVID-19.
Okay.
But last week, Amazon came and she brought me a gift. And it was a gift of a book of poetry by an Alexis Walker, a book of poetry called Butterfly by Alexis Walker. Now, in the grand scheme of things, you're probably asking, who is Alexis Walker? Well, let me tell you, and I'm glad that time is almost over, so I ain't got time to think about it. She's a student of mine. She's just a student who said, Doc, I want to write a book. And, you know, people always say that to you.
Right.
You know, can you help me? Like, no, I can't help you. Write. I mean, you just write. Don't talk to me about the idea of it. Just write, right?
Right.
And she called me and said, Doc, I got the book done.
Wow.
And so I want to read as a quick little short poem. And I want to give a shout out to Wittenberg University's. She's a junior on a track team. We love her. Alexis Walker, if you're watching, I love you so much. As a philosophy major, I love you. As a Black woman who's doing great things on this campus, and wherever you go, I love you. And thank you for this word. I'm gonna read this real quickly. This is called 3 a.m. Sabbath. The sort of the book of poetry goes through time periods. I'm like a journal as she talks about what she's feeling at this time. 3 a.m. Sabbath. I'm upset the sun rose today and forgot you're gorgeous. How could she? My soul drifts at night like a shallow lover overfilled with longing. Doesn't she long for you as well? Sun rays used to brush against your melanin like, I love you. Tell me, does God ever talk about me? Like how we used to talk about God? I mean, it's only right? Well, until next time. Alexis Walker, Wittenberg University, students all over America who have an idea, a vision, a dream, just do it. Don't spend too much time thinking about it. Just do it. Alexis Walker's book, Butterfly, is on Amazon right now. Go get it. Actually, I tell you what, just pick a number between 1 and 50.
7.
The 7th person who inboxes me right now, the 7th person who inboxes me, I will send you a copy of Butterfly. The rest of you, go to Amazon, find it. Thank you to Alexis Walker, her book Butterfly. We'll drink to that. I'm kind of glad this was just grape juice. So listen, thank you for your time. Show number 3, share it, tell a friend, love it. Come see us again Wednesday. On Wednesday, our show deals with, we're in search of Black male educators, right?
Yes.
So we're talking about Black men in the classroom. Come see us next Wednesday. I'm excited. I hope you're excited. Straight No Chaser with Dr. Julius Bailey and Miss Tisa.
And one more thing before we close. Let the words of our mouth
and the meditations of our hearts
be acceptable in thy sight.
Oh, Lord.
Our strength and our Redeemer.
Amen. Have a good day. I will see you on Wednesday. God bless you. Straight No Chaser. So on your end, what it look like?